Persian Gulf War, a moment that redefined American military history. As General Norman Schwarzkopf confronted dictator Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army, entrenched after its brutal invasion of Kuwait, the world watched to see if a nation's right to exist could prevail against brute force. Iraq's million-man army, the fourth largest in the world, stood ready to deliver a repeat of Vietnam to the Americans. But Schwarzkopf had a different plan. He would unleash a ghost army, an unseen, unheard force that would vanish into the desert and strike from where it was least expected. This is the story of the left hook. Modern warfare's greatest deception, the stolen oil accusation. In the summer of 1990, Iraq was drowning in debt, estimated at over $80 billion. Primarily from its grueling 8-year war with Iran, from 1980 to 1988. So Saddam looked to the south to his wealthy, oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait, smaller than New Jersey. Iraq considered Kuwait historically part of its territory. Publicly, Saddam accused Kuwait of oil theft, specifically of slant drilling into Iraq's Ramallah oil field, effectively siphoning off Iraqi crude beneath its border. Beyond the oil accusations, Saddam also demanded that Kuwait and other Gulf states forgive Iraq's war debts. Arguing that Iraq had protected the entire Arab world from Iranian expansion, Saddam demanded, why should Iraq pay for the privilege of serving as the Arab world's shield? We defended them from Iran. We deserve compensation, not collection notices. These economic grievances, coupled with the fabricated claims of oil theft, painted Kuwait as an aggressor and provided the pretext to rally support for the invasion that would soon follow. The miscalculation. Saddam had studied Vietnam obsessively, watching how a determined people could outlast American firepower. He vividly remembered Lebanon in 1983, where 241 Marines died in a single bombing, sending U.S. forces home within months. He reasoned that if he could achieve a swift victory in Kuwait and quickly re-establish oil production, the U.S., heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil, would ultimately accept the new reality rather than risk a protracted and bloody conflict. The invasion, August 2nd, 1990, in the sweltering heat of the Persian Gulf summer. 100,000 Iraqi troops invaded Kuwait. Within 48 hours, they had completely occupied the tiny nation as Iraqi tanks rolled across the border. 3 pillars of world order began to crumble. First, economic catastrophe. With Kuwait's oil reserves now under his control, Saddam suddenly commanded nearly 20% of the world's petroleum, enough to strangle the global economy. Second strategic nightmare. Iraqi forces now sat dangerously close to Saudi Arabia's border, threatening America's most crucial ally in the Islamic world. Third, the precedent in this new post-Cold War world, a dictator had just proven that borders meant nothing, that whole nations could be swallowed while the world watched. Just prior to the invasion, the world's diplomatic establishment remained serenely confident that the Iraqi buildup was just for show, rattling his saber until the Kuwaitis folded. As General Schwarzkopf would later recall, we were getting diplomatic assurances from all over the world. Every elder statesman in the world who was an Arabist was saying, "Oh, this will never happen. An Arab will never invade another Arab. Enter the bear." General Norman Schwarzkopf, called the Bear, wasn't just any general. This was a man who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, earned 3 Silver Stars for valor, and understood that in warfare, perception often matters more than reality. But what made Schwarzkopf truly dangerous wasn't just his experience. It was his understanding of psychology. Schwarzkopf took a special interest in Saddam. He carefully studied the Iraqi dictator's psychology, which enabled him to see that Saddam Hussein was a stubborn and cunning man, but also an extremely limited man. He was clearly used to getting his way by force, and therefore ill-equipped to perceive a world in which he barely knew. In the summer of 1990, Schwarzkopf and his U.S. troops, along with UN coalition forces, arrived in Saudi Arabia at the request of its monarch, King Fahd. When he arrived, Schwarzkopf was handed the largest military operation since World War II. But unlike previous generals who might have opted for a frontal assault directly into Kuwait, playing to Iraqi strengths, Schwarzkopf had a different philosophy. And in order to attack a position that is heavily dug in and barricaded, such as the one we had here, you should have a ratio of 5-to-1 in the way of troops in favor of the attack. So you can see basically what our problem was at that time. We were outnumbered as a minimum 3-to-2 as far as troops were concerned. We were outnumbered as far as tanks were concerned, and we had to come up with some way to make up the difference. The master strategist, Robert Schwarzkopf, knew that in the flat, featureless desert of Iraq, deception would be everything. But his strategy went deeper than simple misdirection. He understood that Saddam expected a repeat of Vietnam, a grinding, bloody war of attrition that would turn American public opinion against the conflict. Schwarzkopf's operational plan for Desert Storm was going to be based on speed, surprise and overwhelming force, anchored by a bold flanking maneuver known as the left hook to pull this off. His strategy had 4 key elements. First, make the enemy see what you want them to see. Create the illusion of a massive amphibious assault in the south, while secretly repositioning your real forces to the west. Second, use technology as a force multiplier. GPS, stealth aircraft, and precision munitions would give coalition forces advantages that Iraqi commanders couldn't even understand. Third, speed over strength moves so fast that the enemy can't react, let alone adapt. Fourth, psychological warfare. Break their will to fight before the real battle even begins. Hold it down. That was a large airburst, but we thought it was filling the sky. And I thank God that airburst took out the telecommunications that you might. Operation Desert Storm began on January 17, 1991, with extensive aerial bombing just for 42 consecutive days and nights. The coalition forces subjected Iraq to one of the most intensive air bombardments in military history. 3-to-1. In fact, there's a hint there that the Deception Act won, the fake invasion. Schwarzkopf invited international media to cover thousands of Marines rehearsing amphibious landings on the Gulf Coast in Oman. Global headlines screamed about the coming beach assault. Iraqi engineers worked frantically mining Kuwait's beaches and positioning artillery to repel a southern invasion that would never come. Act to the digital ghost army. 2 weeks before the ground war began, electronic warfare and deception teams of about 300 soldiers were made to look like 130,000 troops across 100 square kilometers, equipped with communication emulators, decoys that gave off heat signatures, inflatable equipment, fake uniforms and smoke generators. They operated near the Kuwaiti border, simulating movements and radio traffic of entire divisions. U.S. forces even taped Egyptian radio traffic messages about the supposed coalition presence to be intercepted by the Iraqis to reinforce the illusion. Psychological operations teams dropped 500,000 surrender leaflets on Iraqi units, warning them about the impending invasion from the south. Meanwhile, Schwarzkopf was quietly moving an estimated 300,000 coalition troops 300 miles west into the desert. One of the largest armored movements in modern military history. While Saddam stared at the mirage, the real strike force was preparing to deliver the famous left hook. I said, I know that Iraq will be destroyed. I am telling you the truth, Saddam said. These Americans are technicians, not soldiers that fight. They have technology on their side, but that won't help them win. The technology revolution. Moving troops this far, this fast, would have been unthinkable. Without the technology that transformed modern warfare, GPS, the Gulf War marked the first major conflict where global positioning system technology was used on a large scale for U.S. forces. It answered 2 of the most critical battlefield questions. Where am I and where am I going? In the flat, featureless expanse of the desert, no roads, no landmarks, just endless sand. GPS gave American forces a decisive edge. A soldier from the 3rd Armored Division later recalled, "We'd been training for months, but nothing prepared us for that moment when we crossed the berm into Iraq. The desert was so flat, so empty, but we knew exactly where we were going. Our GPS units were like having God's own map." The left hook strikes February 24, 1991, while Iraqi forces faced south toward Kuwait waiting for the main assault. American armor smashed through undefended desert from the west, and raced north to encircle and trap Iraqi forces in Kuwait. Moving deep into Iraq, the 18th Airborne Corps, made up of primarily U.S. Army units, and the French 6th Light Armored Division, cut off Iraqi supply lines, flying more than 150 miles behind enemy lines. The 101st Airborne Division, with over 400 helicopters, took control of Highway 8 along the Euphrates River, effectively cutting off the main Iraqi escape route, marking the largest and deepest thrust into enemy territory in the division's history, while the U.S. 7th Corps, with British forces, moved to the east to further trap Iraqi forces and destroy the Republican Guard. Saddam's strongest units, they moved so fast. They bypassed entire Iraqi divisions surrounding the enemy before they could even react. The ground campaign consisted of 3 or possibly 4 of the largest tank battles in American military history. In armored engagements, tanks destroyed an estimated 3,300 Iraqi tanks, while losing just 31 of their own. Communication between Iraqi units collapsed. Units found themselves cut off, surrounded with no orders and no idea where the enemy was. This was absolutely an extraordinary move. I must tell you, I can't recall any time in the annals of military history when this number of forces have moved over this distance to put themselves in a position to be able to attack the speed of lightning. The numbers are staggering. In just 4 days, 700,000 U.S. troops and around 200,000 personnel from 42 UN coalition partners had defeated 1 million Iraqis, covering 250 miles in less than 100 hours, with losses at 148 U.S. casualties. Compared to the over 30,000 Iraqis within days, 60% of Iraq's tanks and artillery were destroyed. Some Iraqi units surrendered to news crews because they couldn't find American soldiers fast enough. Others simply abandoned their equipment and walked home. Entire divisions evaporated without firing a shot. Schwarzkopf's left hook avoided heavily fortified Iraqi positions, forcing Saddam to retreat or face destruction, earning General Schwarzkopf the legendary nickname Storming Norman. The war ended with a ceasefire on February 28, 1991. U.S. Marines stopped short of entering Kuwait City, allowing Kuwaiti and Arab coalition forces to lead the way and formally reclaim their capital, symbolizing the restoration of Kuwait's independence. Saddam was very upset. He was deeply depressed, and for reasons only known to himself. He accused 5 top-ranking officers of betrayal and then ordered their execution. The sentence was carried out immediately by his personal guards. The Saddam Hussein had studied Vietnam, but he had prepared for the wrong war. He expected American forces to fight like they had in the jungles of Southeast Asia, slowly, methodically, with heavy casualties. Instead, he encountered a military that had learned from Vietnam's lessons and emerged transformed when GPS-enabled navigation, pinpointed travel surveillance aircraft, monitored enemy troop movements, and stealth bombers eluded radar tracking. It signified more than just a military victory. It marked the beginning of a new era in warfare. The left hook proved that deception, speed, and technology could overcome raw numbers. It showed that the army of the future wouldn't be the biggest or the most brutal. It would be the smartest and the fastest. If you remember the Vietnam War, we had no international legitimacy for what we did. As a result, we first of all lost the battle in world public opinion. Eventually, we lost the battle at home. In the Gulf War, we had great international legitimacy in the form of 8 United Nations resolutions, every one of which said kick Iraq out of Kuwait, did not say one word about going into Iraq, taking Baghdad, conquering the whole country, and hanging Saddam Hussein. That's point number 1. Point number 2. Had we gone on to Baghdad? I don't believe the French would have gone, and I'm quite sure that the Arab coalition would not have gone. The coalition would have ruptured, and the only people would have gone would have been the United Kingdom and the United States of America. And, oh, by the way, I think we'd still be there. We'd be like a dinosaur in a tar pit. We could not have gotten out, and we'd still be the occupying power. And we'd be paying 100% of all the costs to administer all of Iraq. If you enjoyed this journey through history, Consider subscribing to Clear and Present History for more documentaries, biographies, and untold stories from the past. To support our mission, please leave a comment and press the like button. Also, tell us what other historical events you'd like to see us explore. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of history. Until next time.